First of all, let me paint a scene. I want to start with scriptures, and then hopefully, if I remember, I'll come back to it. Jesus just found out that his cousin was murdered. He had sent out the apostles 2 by 2. They had come back very excited. Jesus then said, well, let's go away to a faraway, deserted place. So they went out to Wichita. And as Jesus was getting out of the boat, he saw many, many people. And his heart was moved with what? Pity. And so he began to preach to them. What were the guys behind him in the boat thinking and saying? They were grumbling. And then Jesus was preaching to them. And then one of the apostles, I don't know which one it was, probably the guy who drew the shortest straw, came up to Jesus. And, us preachers, we proclaim this, and it sounds so holy. But this is what he said, Jesus, and he cocked his head this way. We're really concerned about the people. They've been here all day, and we know that they are hungry. What he was really saying is, Jesus, we're hungry. Get these people out of here. So Jesus looked at him and said, oh, well, if this is really a concern of yours, feed them yourself. And like I said, us preachers, we proclaim this so holy, but this was not a holy response. It was a response of sarcasm. Because the apostle said, really? Are we supposed to spend 2/3 of our yearly wages just to give each one of them a mouthful? I mean, come on, really? And then Jesus asked the question, well, how many do you have? And what did they say? You're wrong. Jesus did not say, they didn't respond with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He said the most important scripture of stewardship. He told his stewardship council, go and see. We forget that part of the story, don't we? That's stewardship. Tonight, what I want to do is to go through 3 different things. First of all, our story in Wichita. Second of all, what I call the maintenance of the story. And third, the flesh to the spirituality. My name is Father Ken. The last name is awfully tough, so you don't need to worry about it. I've been a priest for 22 years, been in about 5 different parishes, rural and big city parishes. I say that only because I'm not important. I am but a messenger. It's the message that's most important. But I do say that because I have lived that message both as an associate pastor and as a pastor, and the message is alive and well. First of all, some reminders and disclaimers. Wichita doesn't have a model. Sometimes people will say, oh, the Wichita model. There really is no Wichita model. Stewardship is simply gratefully recognizing that everything comes from God, and then providing opportunities for people to share those gifts that they have gratefully received. It's simply discipleship in action. It's not something that's cornered to just Wichita. It's in St. Louis. It's everywhere. But our story is a little bit unique. First of all, a little bit of a history lesson. We were established in 1887. There are 25 counties in southeast Kansas. That's where Wichita is. We have about 20,000 square miles. St. Louis, you have about 6,000. So it's a little bit different. Our population is 988,000. Yours? Ooh, you got a few more people here, don't you? Okay. We have 90 parishes, with about 66 of those parishes with a resident pastor. You have 187 according to the Kennedy Directory. 11% of our people are Catholic, or 23% of your people are Catholic. In Wichita, 65% of them live in the city. The rest live in the rural areas. I don't know what your demographics are like, but it would be interesting to know. We have 124 diocesan priests and one lonely religious priest. You have 613 priests. The number of Catholics per priest is about the same, very close to one another. We have no permanent deacons. We have a few transplants. But according to your directory, you have 268 permanent deacons. Okay? That's an important fact. Bishop Gerber, who I'll be speaking about, one of the reasons why we haven't started a permanent diaconate is because of our stewardship. I don't know about your diocese, but if you've got a father, if you've got a sister, if you've got a deacon, I'll let them do it. I don't need to get involved. We'll let Father take care of that. So that's one of the reasons why we have been slow on a permanent diaconate program. We have over 50 seminarians, and many of them grace your seminary just down the street. Catholic schools, we have 34 elementary schools, 4 high schools, which is about 8,000 students. And in our PSR, we have about 5,800 students and about 2,000 high school students. So that's just a little bit about who the Wichita Diocese is as compared to your diocese. So first of all, let's begin with a stewardship prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. And together we pray, Lord, teach me to be generous. In the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. In the U.S. Bishop's Pastoral Letter on Stewardship, a Disciple's Response that was published in 1992, it says that as each one has received a gift, use it to the service of one another. It goes on to say that once one chooses to become a disciple of Jesus Christ, stewardship is not an option. This is the model of stewardship, not Wichita. Monsignor McGrade is who we consider to be kind of our founder in the stewardship way of life in Wichita. It was in the early 1970s, well in advance of the U.S. Pastoral Letter on Stewardship, that he began to promote this concept of the stewardship as a way of life in action. McGrade said that the average person spends about 25,000 days on earth. That makes you about 68 years old. When we meet the Lord on the last day of our life here, we must account for how we will spend those days. He always began with a person's time. If we believe that stewardship is all about gifts, that is one gift that all of us has. So this is how he began it in that parish in 1975. He did not talk about money. He talked about a person's time and how important that time is and how every one of us have been given time. He said, did we recognize the gifts that God has given us and use them for His glory, to draw others to Him, and to build up the kingdom here on earth? Or did we take what He gave us for granted and use it for personal gain? So this is how Monsignor McGrade began this. He began it by preaching it over and over and over. And he had an Irish brogue. So the people loved to listen. You know, the Irishmen, you preachers you have a gift because you could read the phone book and it sounds holy. But some of you will ask, how did that parish do it? Over and over and over. Constantly. Bishop Gilmore, who's a former bishop of Dodge City, he says that a good preacher has one, maybe two good thoughts, and then just repeats them over and over and over. This is how you begin with stewardship in a parish. The second thing that he did is he gathered leaders, and he began to lead leaders. One-on-one, personal relationship. It's all about relationships. It's not about numbers. It's kind of like youth ministry. You do something you have all of these chairs set up for the youth and you're expecting the whole room to be full and 3 of them show up. So then what do? Say, all right, kids, I'm sorry, not enough of you showed up. No, you work with those 3. The book, The Soul of the Apostolate, is a wonderful book about stewardship. It's a great book written for diocesan priests by a Trappist monk. Go figure. But it speaks about, let's start with the choir. Don't worry about the people who aren't there. Put all of your emphasis, your money, your time in the people who are there. And then they, in turn, will bring the others in. Well, what happened in this parish of St. Francis of Assisi, the results was that lives were being changed. It unified a parish community. And the overall mission of the parish was growing and expanding. The community was bonding very similar to that of a family. Parishioners were challenged to recognize and receive and to accept their God-given giftedness within a well-organized process, to commit annually a sharing of their time, talent, and treasure. These 3 words are key. Generously, sacrificially, and proportionately. Generously, sacrificially, and proportionately. How many of you guys buy Girl Scout cookies? They're bad for you. Don't do that. Why do you buy them? Because they're so good, but more importantly, you have little Sally. Would you buy some cookies, please? How many of you, other than former Girl Scouts, can recite the mission of the Girl Scouts? You're donating. You're making a donation. Stewardship is not about donation. Buying a Girl Scout cookie, you have a relationship with that little Sally because she lives down the street, or you're trying to get rid of the kid, one or the other, or you just like the cookies. That's consumerism. That's a donation, as opposed to a tithe. A tithe has those 3 words of generously, sacrificially, and proportionate. A tithe of my time, my talent, and my treasure. And why am I tithing it? I'm tithing it to a mission, not a donation. So this is the difference between volunteering and stewardship and donating and tithing. Huge differences. Well, what happened in Wichita was Monsignor was here at St. Francis of Assisi Parish. He was assigned there in 1975. And Bishop Gerber came from Dodge City. He was a Wichita priest, came back from Dodge City, and did what every good pastor should do. He listened. He gathered people around, and it was called a people gathered. And so in 1984, he had a diocesan planning and listening sessions. He asked them 3 questions. Great questions if you're going to do this in your parish. The first one is, What are the qualities that make a good parish? Number 2, what are the obstacles that prevent a good parish from accomplishing its mission? And number 3, as a parish, what would you do if you had unlimited resources? As the listening process progressed, we gathered pastors and parishioners and parishes throughout the diocese. One thing that surfaced was in Wichita, we're a river town, so there's an east side and a west side, and you have to have a visa to get across the river. You guys have that problem here? Yeah. In Wichita, I mean, it's such a huge city that it takes 20 minutes to get from one side of the town to the other during rush hour. Woo! So what happened is Monsignor Magritte was on the west side. It was a young parish, lots of young families. And what he was asking the parishioners to do was to tithe generously, proportionately, sacrificially, not only of their money, but more importantly, their time. Then there was a parish on the east side who was looking across the banks of the river and saw what was going on and thought, we need to start doing that. So that pastor, an Irishman, called the other Irishman and said, could you send a delegation over? So sure, we travel across the river and they meet with the parish leaders. The parish leaders of this east side parish looked at him and said, kind of like what the Athens did with St. Paul, that was very interesting. Come back some other time and maybe we'll talk about it. So they traveled across town, and about a year and a half later, poor camera person, a year and a half later, they invited them back. And they said, we want what you are doing. What are you doing? It's all about relationships. So they taught this parish over here, if you want to invite people into the stewardship way of life, you have to go to their homes. So just like a capital campaign, they went from one home to another. So they trained the leaders, let the leaders lead, and every home was visited. Every family was sat down with another family to share the benefits of stewardship, all the benefits that you are well rehearsed. But it's parishioners speaking to parishioners. Now that's all well and good. But if your parish doesn't have ministries for these people to give their time to, then you're in trouble. Last night I was at a council meeting, parish council meeting, and I said, what's your number one need? More volunteers. I said, what would you do with 200 volunteers if you had them tomorrow? They really wouldn't know what to do with them. So if you're going to invite people, you have to have ministries. And we'll talk about how to do that and how our diocese has really struggled with that and maybe come to some conclusions. But in this people gathered, all of the diocese, they looked at the west side of Wichita and they looked at the east side of Wichita and they were saying, whoa, things are happening there. Why can't we do this as a diocese? Here lies the biggest difference between Wichita and, as far as I know, any other diocese. And when they kindly asked me to come here, I said, this is not apples to apples. We did this as a diocese, not as a parish. So Monsignor Magritte and Monsignor Reagan began it in 75 in their parishes, but by 1984, the rest of the diocese says, we want what they have. And what do they have? Well, the answer or the solution, the problem that we were having is that there were too many diocesan assessments. Do you guys have those? Too many fundraisers. Aren't those fun? Don't we love fundraisers? And we had too heavy of a secondary education subsidy for parishes. So our goal was to have a parish-based stewardship in every parish. And here's the quote that they used: to free the gifts of the body of Christ in the diocese through parish enrichment and diocesan assistance, with a view towards increased diocesan unity. So this vision was not of finances, but rather that of prayer. We came to the name that we call it is the United Catholic Stewardship. It would include these key components. It would be parish-based in every parish. Number 2, it would provide an opportunity for all parishioners to live out their call to discipleship through their parish, with the added invitation and opportunity to serve the wider church through the diocese. Number 3, and this is one of my jobs, is to help parishes to identify, plan, and provide for the needs of their parishioners by establishing pastoral councils, mission statements, objectives, and goals. So last night I was in Newton, Kansas, good group of 12 people, and basically their pastoral council is they hand out the bulletin to one another and read it to each other. Have you guys been at council meetings like that? And when you leave, you're thinking, we didn't do anything. So one of the first questions I asked them is, what is your parish mission? No, I don't know. It's on the bulletin somewhere. Best kept secrets, isn't it, fathers? Best kept secrets, front of the bulletin. It's what everybody calls us about. So we looked at their mission. Then we looked at their, what we call the SWOT analysis, their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, their threats. How does this apply to your mission? And so what we'll go from there is, okay, let's look at some objectives. That one of, we need more volunteers. So is that really the problem? Let's reverse that and say, we need to inspire the parishioners to want to be a part of the life of the parish. Because honestly, if you had more volunteers, what would you do with them? I don't know if you could handle them. So we wanted to look at, throughout the diocese, that every parish would have a pastoral council and would be able to identify their needs and then to be able to have a pastoral plan. We challenged all of our parishes, number 4, to become places of what we call the 4 pillars of stewardship, places of hospitality, prayer, formation, and service. Now, one of the key outcomes of being a stewardship diocese is the one that everybody calls me about. I understand you have tuition-free schools. By the way, they're not tuition-free. They cost I'm on tape, a heck of a lot. But as much as I hate to say it, Hillary Clinton might have a point. We know that in baptism that the primary responsibility of raising our children in the faith belongs to the parents. But what we decided in our diocese, this was in the 70s, remember, when Catholic schools are closing, when religious are leaving and the costs are going up, we decided that parents need help. And this is the crux. We made a decision collectively, priests especially, that in order to provide Catholic schools and Catholic education to our children, this needed to be the responsibility of the entire parish, not just the parents. That's the key difference. So Father Buford calls me, and I just saw a kid on the airline. It had a name on there, Buford. I always use that name, but it may mean I can't anymore. But Father Buford calls me and says, I understand, I want to do this stewardship thing. Okay, Father, why? Well, we're in danger of closing our school. Okay, stewardship is not funding a mission. Well, that's just words to me. It's not really what he's wanting to hear. So I say, okay, Father, you got a parish school. How important is that school to your mission? Well, I don't know what our mission is. Well, if the school is not fulfilling your parish mission, then get rid of it or change your parish mission. And if it is a part of your parish mission, have you inspired? Have you informed? Have you invited your parishioners to embrace this mission? Do they realize how important this mission is? You see, what oftentimes happens is we in the stewardship world, we are converted, because it's all about conversion. And suddenly we have an answer to a problem that our parishioners don't realize is a problem. So we're kind of like our politicians. I've got the answer. Now I'm looking for the problem to put it in. And until our parishioners realize that the responsibility of raising the children in the ways of the faith is a parish responsibility, a shared responsibility, a communal responsibility, they're going to say, well, if the school closes, well, that's all right. They raise the tuition or close the school. It's not my problem. That's where stewardship parish or stewardship diocese is different, because that mission is our mission. But until I know that mission, am inspired, informed, and invited to be a part of that mission, it's somebody else's problem, not mine. So your solution of my tithe, your solution of me being involved in the life of the parish, that's a solution to a problem that just simply is not my problem. So in 1984, 85, 86, we began to be what we would call a stewardship diocese, which means every parish, which makes it a little bit different because that makes it a climate of stewardship. That means all of our priests, all of the kids that are growing up, it's not like going from, St. Ignatius and then I go over to St. Clement and St. Ignatius is stewardship and St. Clement, no. They're all a stewardship diocese, all stewardship parishes. So what were the results? Well, first of all, there was a greater spirit and unity among pastors and parishes. There is a high level of weekly mass attendance, more than double than the national. The percentage of giving of treasure based on average household income within our diocese is at least double of the national average. But most visible for me is approximately 25% of our parishes have 24/7 perpetual adoration. 63 out of the 93 have some sort of adoration. When people look at our vocations and they say, how can you, a small diocese, have so many young men going into the seminary? I attribute it to joyful priests, for one thing, and I'm kind of one of the grumpier ones. Second of all, adoration chapels. That's where they're hearing the call. And third, solid Catholic education, especially Catholic schools. That's where the kids are hearing the call of the Lord. But it's not just about Catholic schools. We have a Guadalupe clinic that has 40 doctors and about 3,000 patients, free. We have a Lord's Diner that serves about 600 people every night, 2 places in the city, free. We have our Catholic schools. We have a Catholic Life Center that has a nursing facility, a priest retirement center, and boy, that is wonderful. And a retreat center. I'm the director there too. I tell people as I look out my window, I see my 2 futures. I look to the left and I see the retirement center, and I look to the right and I see the cemetery. You know, years ago, I had to be really nice to my nieces, but now I don't have to because I've got a retirement center over there. So we had no place for our priests to retire. So we have this beautiful campus called the Catholic Life Center that has all of these things, all as a result of this stewardship. 70 to 75% of the Catholics go to Sunday Mass. 50 to 60 seminarians every year. And I do look young. And for some of you, you will still say I am, but I'm 51 years old. There are more priests younger than me in my diocese than older. I am one of the older priests. A lot of that I say is because of the joyful priests, and they are bringing in young men. In 1985, the combined annual diocesan income of all of our parishes was under 15 million. By 2004, it was over 51 million. Anecdotally, I was a pastor of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. They have 2,000 registered families. The weekly contribution of those families is $90,000. Church of the Magdalene has 1,600 registered families, 70 to 75,000 weekly collections. St. Mary's in Newton with 400 registered families, 14 to 15,000 weekly collection. Okay? Sacrificially, proportionate, and honest. Honest is the key to all this too. The percent of giving, the annual ordinary giving of our diocesan families is somewhere between 2 and 3%. The ordinary given of our families that have kids in the school is between 4 and 5%. One of the dangers of this tithing thing with the Catholic school is we think, well, it's the Catholic school parents' tithe who is affording this. No. In the majority of our parishes, the number of parishioners who have no children in the school far outweigh. Normally it's about 20 to 30%, and this would be a city parish, have children in the school. How are we operating the mission of the parish, the school, the Guadalupe Clinic, the Lord's Diner, and all those things? It's those 70% who have no children in the school. Why? Because they believe in the mission of the parish. And one of the missions of the parish is going to be forming our children and the youth. Now, priests, you know how this works. It's called bait and switch. We're wanting the kids, but we're really wanting the parking lot ministry. I get more annulments, more marriage prep, more fallen away Catholics in the parking lot. And especially if you let the kids out late, then they're stuck out in the parking lot longer. It's all about relationships. How do you get those people there? Well, they're dropping their kids off at school. They're picking them up. Here's the greatest stewardship meeting. Little trick. You guys ready to write this down? In order to get everybody to come to a stewardship meeting, you say, there is a mandatory sports meeting tonight at 7 o'clock. And priests were allowed to do this. It's called bait and switch. And you say, okay, well, Father would like to have a few words before we start and talk about the uniforms and everything. And then for 5 minutes, I will speak about how being a Christian athlete is being a good steward. Everything is about stewardship. One of the younger priests said, well, okay, Ken, that's wonderful, but how many times a year do you think we ought to preach about stewardship? Folks, this is not natural family planning where you would have a Sunday and do it once. There is no Sunday, no sporting event, no baptismal class, no confirmation, no marriage prep that doesn't involve stewardship. And so like our diocese, we have created what I call sacramental helps. For you got a couple here. They're preparing for the sacrament of baptism. What does that have to do with stewardship? Well, what name have you given this child? And they come up with really bizarre names. Have you guys noticed that? Bizarre names. And yeah, it's Matilda. Okay, well, do you own Matilda? Well, the first time they're a parent, they think they're in charge, but then they learn real quick. No, this is an act of stewardship. And I have a talk about parenthood being the ultimate act of stewardship. It is. The ultimate act of stewardship is bringing a new life into the world. Now, as the Archbishop said, do we have the perfect model? Well, yes. No, we don't. About 30% of our parishes have not fully embraced the stewardship way of life. Gratefully recognizing and receiving God's gifts and sharing them in love of God and neighbor. That's what we do in the parish. This is what Monsignor McGree did. This is what we're doing as a diocese. We're recognizing the gifts of the individual people, helping them to receive them, and then here's the crux of it. We've got to provide opportunities for them to share them in love of God and neighbor. Molding, Kansas, 15 families there. Matilda, no, we'll call her, yeah, Matilda, why not? Matilda likes to crochet. She crochets blankets. She's homebound now. What can she do for the parish? She feels kind of bad because she used to do dinners and all kinds of stuff. So we came up with the idea that that's her passion. She does blankets. Let's get some other parishioners to take those blankets, bring them to Wichita to an organization called A Better Choice, which helps unwed teens with unplanned pregnancies, and give those blankets to those young ladies. It wasn't on the stewardship form. You know, I'm sorry, Matilda, you can't do that. Nope, sorry. Then create a ministry for Matilda. Quit trying to get people to fit into ministries and instead start with the person and create a ministry around the person. That's what stewardship is. The grateful response of a Christian disciple who recognizes and receives God's gifts and shares these gifts in love of God and neighbor. Jesus just found out that John was murdered. His apostles were pretty disappointed that they didn't have that time alone with Jesus. They were hungry. Jesus did not address the need of the people so much as he addressed the need of the apostles to address their need. And the key statement that Jesus said, "How many do you have?" And they said, "I don't know." And then he said, "Go and see." That really is what stewardship is about. Going and seeing what gifts do our parishioners have. Gratefully recognizing them, receiving them, and providing them with opportunities to share in love of God and neighbor. Thank you very much.